We're on.
I think we are on. Yes.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to the PM Book Club. Today we have the distinct honor of having not one but three authors with us. We will be talking about balanced leadership that we have been reading. We had an introduction meeting last week on this. So let me quickly introduce our authors, and then we'll start from there. So we've got Ralf Muller over here, Dr. Ralf Muller, who's a professor of project management in BI Norwegian Business School and is adjunct professor at University of Technology Sydney and Dalian University of Technology in China. We've also have the pleasure of Nathalie Drouin, who's joining us from Canada, who's the executive director of KEOPS, an international research consortium on the governance of large infrastructure projects. She's a professor at the Department of Management at University of Quebec, also an adjunct professor at the University of Technology in Australia. We are delighted to have Professor Shankar, who is actually joining us from New Zealand, where it is 2:30 a.m. in the morning at the moment. Professor Shankar is a professor of organizational project management in the School of Built Environment at the University of Technology, Sydney, Australia, where he's also a co-researcher of the Centre for Informatics Research and Innovation. So, welcome everyone to PM Book Club today.
Thank you. Our pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from Sydney, Australia, not New Zealand. New Zealand, 2 hours ahead.
They're the same for us from far away. We always think that
we have a time difference. They're at 3:30, I think.
Thank you very, very much. That was Himanshu Jain, who with myself and Nicholas Lambrou, we are lecturers at the University of Westminster, and we've got this book club and we discuss project management books. So we thank you very, very much for being here and for making this great effort to be here. I am actually very humble, especially from Sydney, because with your name, we took your name out of the slide, and so apologies, Shankar, but here we are. We are discussing a lovely book, a book that is trying to bridge a gap, I think, between leadership on one hand, project leadership on one hand, and teamwork on the other hand. And as you say in the book, most work is usually either one or the other. And, you have identified that point, and you've been writing about it for quite a few years now. All that academic work is put together. We have to mention PMI, who has given you a grant for that, and it is important. So, if we could talk a bit about what balanced leadership itself is. Is that the question? Let's ask for that with that general question. Give us a feel for what gap you have found in the intellectual market, and therefore writing this book for us.
Who shall go?
Nathalie, Ralf, you want to start?
Okay, good. Well, the book about balanced leadership has two novel things, at least from our perspective. One is balanced leadership, and one is horizontal leadership. And balanced leadership is about finding the right leader at any moment in time in the project. Yeah, depending on the situation that the project is in, we might need a specialist to bring us through a crisis, through an issue, and that specialist might be the best leader at that moment in time. Yeah, next moment in time, we might need a clearly vertical leadership from the project manager making a tough decision on how to cut the scope of the project in order to stay within the budget. Yeah. So at these different times in the project, we need different leaders, and the idea of balanced leadership is exactly about this. And a little bit on the background, how we got there is that the traditional leadership theories, which were developed in the context of permanent organizations, they keep on telling us that if a team wants to be productive, then they must work together for a long time. Yeah, you know, all the Tuckman model from the 1960s with form, storm, norm, and perform, etc. But that does not work in projects. In projects, everything is temporary. People flow in and out all the time. Yeah, there's no time to get familiar with each other. Yeah. So how can project teams be productive even though they are not working together for a long time? Yeah, that was one of the questions that drove us. And what we observed is that in projects, this lack of knowing each other for a long time is compensated by looking out for who would be the best leader in this particular situation that we are in. Yeah, and that is where we identified balanced leadership as a as something specific for projects. Now, when we look further into this balanced leadership phenomenon, that everybody can be a leader at a particular point in time, we also observed a strange form of delegation we first thought, and that was that once the need for a particular skill set in leadership arises, the project manager appoints this person, but opposite to, or let's say different to what we see in the more permanent organization, the project manager did not lean back and said, "You do it." Mm-hmm. Instead, the project manager subordinated himself or herself to the leadership of the just appointed person, just to make sure that the project is successful. Yeah. And of course, by doing that, the project manager also kept on having a governance head, which allowed him to stop this appointed horizontal leader in case this person was doing something wrong, something negative for the project. Yeah. So these are the two novelties that we see in the book, and that we have described, I think, quite detailed.
And if I may, I can add to what Ralf mentioned, is that balance, why we use balance, because it's really a shift, a dynamic shift from the project manager, the vertical leader, and one team member, or maybe many team members. So it's really, we have to think of when we try to bet to and understand very quickly what do we mean by balance. It's really just thinking of a shift. And when do we need to shift the leadership from the vertical to the horizontal leader?
Right.
Mm-mm.
I think that I used to be a project manager, and often tasks will be given to somebody else, and it kind of a subconscious process. This guy is better at software, or this guy is better at hardware. That's a process that we have experienced, but this is how we try to figure out what is really happening. A theory for it, yeah.
Expanding a little bit on what Nathalie said, with this shift, there might be the impression that the shift is only between the vertical leader and an appointed horizontal leader. That's not what we mean. Yeah, the shift can be from the vertical leader to a team member. It can be to a sub-team, can be to the team as such to find a decision or to lead through a crisis. Yeah. So all the existing forms of leadership approaches are still possible in the project. We are not saying they do not exist. Yeah, they're all there. Yeah, it's just that we added horizontal and balanced leadership to it.
Indeed, all the leadership styles that exist, you have covered all these, because, as you say, this is a detail of how the interaction, I think, happens, and how we pass on some responsibility, but not the full responsibility of the whole thing. And it is fascinating, and actually it is complicated. That is, there's quite a lot of work. Are you passing on to a team? Are you passing on to one person who almost takes over from you without you losing the responsibility, and all that? And the perspective is very much from the vertical leader. If I may ask, because you did mention Tuckman, and on page 42 of your book, yes, very clearly you note this resistance of temporary and the fact that we've got ever increasing, I think you call it, ever shorter iterations between us, and therefore how can we get get into the performing zone of Tuckman. On the other hand, the three of you have worked together, and therefore probably you are already in a performing zone because you have worked together. And that is something I think Graham Winch is talking about, that not everything in project management is temporary, and there are certain instances where we're working with the same people. And so in your case, where we've got three eminent academics, yes, because the other thing that is beautiful about the book is that it is both practical and academic at the same time. The academic consciousness, and you carefully through the theories, the social theory, I think is very nice, because I myself am an academic, but he also balances it with the practitioner. So the question I would love to ask is to get an understanding between you, the three of you, and maybe others, because you have a lot of acknowledgements. It's interesting that every chapter you've got an acknowledgement. How did you work? Sort of, was one of you more horizontal, if I can use these words, than the others? Was there a project manager, or were the three of you sharing? Does one of you feel that you were the horizontal element that got power every now and then? How did it work? Is it by age? I don't know.
Good question.
So I'm the youngest one. So the first criteria why it's not even balancing the leadership. It's because we really enjoy working together. So that's what lead our collaboration. But in terms of leadership, I don't know, Shankar or Ralf, if you want to say a few words, and I can add to what you were saying, what you will say.
Well, Shankar has written a nice article about our collaboration. It's published in the International Journal of Managing Project Business. And I think the essence of that article is that we don't have a vertical leader. Yeah, what we practice is distributed leadership. Yeah, so one has an idea and communicates it with others, and if they like it, then we go for it. Now, over the period of such a project, like 2 years of research and another year or 1.5 for writing it up, there are times when some people have more time and some people have less time. Yeah? And we cover up for that among us. Yeah. So if I'm traveling a lot and have a lot of teaching to do, then Shankar and Nathalie do what was originally planned for me to do. Yeah. And when Shankar has the same issue, we stand in for him. Yeah. So we have no one project leader, so to say. We practice shared or distributed leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see it. Maybe Nathalie and Shankar see it completely different.
Yeah, I'm reminded of what's called Negara working. It's a concept used in Japanese companies where small scale production is done, not the mass production where the product moves from one person to the other. In a joint manufacturing, there are a few of people standing on a platform or something, and they work together. And when each person has to do a task, but if one person is late, the other person will move around and take their task so that the job gets done. And it's similar to that. So we automatically know, yeah, Ralf is busy now, so let me do something. And Nathalie says, oh, Sankar is busy now. So we had some kind of an intuitive way of working. And we kind of wrote this up as an action research, as a meta methodology in a paper. So, okay.
A typical example for that would be our very first book that we had together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book on research methodologies. Yeah, we stood together in the lunchroom at Umeå University, and were just brainstorming a little bit, and said, well, it would be good to have a book on research methodologies in project management. Yeah, and so we got deeper and deeper into the subject, up to the point where we said we have to do that. Yeah, and then we started it, and it turned out that Shankar was the one who's driving it in. Yeah, so he was the one pushing the people that we can have the book published by the IRNOP conference in 2013. Yeah, so he did most of the work, we can say, but still Nathalie is the first author. Yeah, so it's not that there's a direct link between the order of authors and who's the driving force at any point in time in the project. It is more like we look at what is a useful order of authors, and who has done what at what point in time.
And we see a value in that, because at a certain point and we rotate the order on different books. For instance, if for the balanced leadership, Ralf had wrote books before, so it was natural that Ralf would be the leader, the first name on this book. And on other books we decided to rotate. So you will see, if you look at our books, sometimes it's Muller, Drouin, Shankar, and other time it's Shankar and Drouin, Muller, and then we go on these different order. And as Ralf raised and Shankar raised, very important. It is probably more based on collaboration and as I mentioned, enjoying working together. And then we can decide from time to time. Someone can take the lead to write a paper and then share it with the others. And the other time will be another person who will take the lead of a book or a paper. So we I have to say, we never fight. It's been how many years, guys? we never experienced one single fight between us, because we respect also each other, and we respect that from time to time someone can take the lead, and the other time it could be another person, and it works very well.
And that needs to be distinguished from the research that is behind the books.
Mm-hmm.
When we do the research for the books, and we have a team of 20 to 40 researchers all over the world in 10, 20 different teams, yeah, then it's much more hierarchical. Yeah, then there's clear that there's the principal investigator who gets the money, and this is the vertical leader. And then we see balanced leadership, then we see horizontal leadership, and other forms of leadership.
Great.
Very fascinating.
Yes. You mentioned research. I mean, I'm intrigued actually to hear more about the research that went into this book, PMI. How did it come about, and what was the approach you took? Did you have a hypothesis in mind, or balanced leadership is something you discovered during that research?
Well, the original proposal we sent to PMI to get funding was on the basis that the literature only tells us there are vertical leaders and they are distributed and shared leaders, and nothing in between.
Mm-hmm.
And our proposal was we wanted to find out what is the relationship between these two types of leadership. And then we moved into it. We observed, we did interviews, etc., and we identified first balanced leadership, and then by looking at the details, what goes on in balanced leadership, we identified horizontal leadership.
Yeah, we're also curious about what does it, how does it matter? Does it actually matter? So we're looking at whether it improves the performance of the project or success of the project as using common. So we are interested in how does this happen and does it actually contribute to anything? Yeah.
And Ralph mentioned about the grant we got from PMI. When we send our proposal, we also define a strategy of how we will conduct the research. So we use this strategy as a basic approach to develop the knowledge that we use to write the books and the book and the articles.
And you have written quite a lot, and it's interesting to see the decision making process, because you have to study decision making, and you got this lovely quote from Bill George: "The role of leaders is not to get other people to follow them, but to empower others to lead." And you seem, as a group, to have passed your first step, which was choosing the person, the horizontal person. Maybe that was your first discussion, and almost Tuckman-like, you did not go into a fight; you just immediately moved into performing. So that is beautiful to see, and then you've got these case studies from around the world. And I must say that this is sort of an unstructured world, that is cultures where we are used to working with others. We have the humility as leaders to allow others to work. We're not a hierarchical society, we are more democratic and all that. And I'm a bit intrigued with Chinese, for example, connection, Professor, whether the same things work similarly. And you mentioned the Guangxi thing, but let me come back to the case studies for a moment, because these case studies, you've got some basic results on pages 21 and 22, which of course you will not. And you've got the vertical leader who deals with strategic and political and business management and administration, big human resources sort of issues. And then the horizontal leaders at a totally different list of things they're doing, the decisions, technical decisions about stakeholders, about tasks, and all that. And I was very surprised to see that these lists are very distinct. There isn't a shared item in the decision making. That is, the vertical leaders are always more on the strategic and the business side of things, while the horizontal are on essentially on the daily tasks and the technical stuff. Is that what you expected, or is that by design, or is it just find in itself? Because I was very surprised that there's no link between the two lists of what decisions are taken.
Maybe I can say because it comes. Some of the results comes from a paper that we wrote before, and then we use it in the book as well. There's two things here. Depending of the type of the sector, like if you are in construction, if you are in finance, you are in or if you, and depending on the type of projects as well, it may have an impact on the decision making, the task, how you will balance leadership. If you are willing, or if you have the capability to balance leadership. For example, in the Canadian cases, it was in the construction sector. It was a firm that was building, dams, hydroelectrical dams all over the world. And their cultural approaches and organizational approach was more, we tell you what to do in the team. So that was really vertical oriented. So that's why when we were looking at decision making, we just realized that the horizontal leader, they were called to make decision on specific task because of the influence, because of the culture of the vertical or the project manager who had difficulties to delegate decision making. So it depends of the context. And if you look at other firms, other case study that we conduct in different countries, then you will see different patterns. So there's also contextual or environmental elements that may influence the way you will use or not use fully balance leadership.
Yeah, they were not uniformly the same. There were differences in projects. For example, in Australia, we had a bank where agile was the way. There, the leadership was quite common. People knew what they were doing, and they didn't have to have a process. They knew exactly what to do. And also, there was this sharing of project manager between the specialist and the project manager. They were both managing the project together, because the architect, for example, in IT project is powerful as project manager is a generalist. But project manager had to be responsible for cost, dealing with the client, managing the scope, because he's responsible to deliver the budget on time, on cost, that kind of thing. But at the same time, we found another project where it was financial transaction. It was called the switch to when you put a card, MasterCard or something and buy, this switch automatically transferred to the merchant bank. This is a switch. It's electrical switch, but it's actually a software switch. But there, the financial transactions are highly risky. So anything wrong will cost millions of dollars of damage. So the leadership was very controlled in that case, but it was the context in which the leadership was happening. But there was sharing, but the level of sharing, we actually wrote a paper in which we explained how agile projects versus waterfall projects, new product development, construction project. We did a comparison of the styles.
Yeah, and there was quite a bit of spectrum in these styles. So I remember interviews where the interviewees told us, I would never do something like appointing a horizontal leader. Yeah, I will never give up my leadership authority. I'm in charge and I stay in charge. Yeah. So we find these people as well. Yeah. And of course, in these projects, you don't find balanced or shared or horizontal leadership. Yeah. And in others, they said, well, horizontal leadership is what we do every day. Yeah. So it's a wide spectrum. And coming back to your original question, I think we were still a bit surprised, all three of us, that the distinction between this time, cost, quality, responsibility assumed by the project manager and all the technical decisions and day-to-day work decisions by the horizontal leader, that this was so clearly divided. Yeah. So I would not have expected that in the beginning. At least I was a bit surprised. I cannot speak for my two co-authors, but I was surprised that it was so clear.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. You did put the style sort of, but I must say, I think I'm talking to Oxford University Press now, that the colors are not very distinguishable, and it's very difficult to read the diagram. But also in your colored papers themselves, you've chosen different hues of blue, which again are not very easy to see. But there is a lot of autocratic here, yes, which was much more than I expected. But as you say, this in an engineering context, one expects that more. That is beautiful. One thing about myself and Himanshu is that we are also part of the responsible project management movement, and we care very much about the consequences and the unintended consequences of project as such. And again, looking at that list on page 20, we see, for example, that the vertical leader, they've taken, I think, 79% of business decisions, but 21% of strategic decisions, yes, or 45% of HR. So I am thinking here that the vertical leader himself or herself has someone else above them who has taken the rest of the decisions. And in some of the papers, you do talk about program managers and then project managers, and that there is some sort of horizontal, vertical link between them. But there are some numbers where it is striking that what the project manager has to do has already been predetermined by someone above them, and that then brings us to complex project management and all that. So how can you be responsible for someone if the bigger decisions have been taken from someone above you, and therefore when you are going further down, drilling down to your horizontal leaders, actually everyone is a leader, but no one is a leader in the sense that there is someone more powerful above. Is there a comment on that? That is, because you do use the word project manager consistently in the book, above the project manager. I was wondering who is responsible for the results when the results come out of a project, benefits, value.
I think the answer to your question lies in the time horizon. So the higher up you go in this hierarchy, the longer is the time horizon. And that poor little guy called horizontal leader might has a very, very short time frame to do his or her horizontal leadership. Yeah, it might be a task for a day or 2 days, or maybe even just a few hours. Yeah. So I think these decisions that are made at the higher levels, they are more long term. Yeah, if we can talk about long term in projects, but they are at a longer time horizon than the decisions that are made by the project manager and then by the horizontal leaders.
And what we saw as well is that there's a time horizon where you have to take the decision very quickly. And this is why the delegation was for a specific task, because we know this person has the expertise to help us decide and make the decision. So that's why we delegate the leadership to this person to fix a problem or realize a task very quickly, because we need it to conduct the to continue the overall project. So that's a specific type of delegation that we saw as well, and it was I speak by from Canadian cases, so it was it occurs in Canadian cases.
Yeah, the question you asked was an interesting one, because when we did the pilots, before we actually entered into this research, while we were waiting for PMI, to give us the grant, we already started a pilot. We did case studies in China, we case studies in Australia. We just test out our protocol and other things. Initially, we were going to interview the project manager and the team members. Then we realized that in some organizations, the top management had some kind of say in whether balanced leadership actually happens in projects. They had to have a environment in which they were supportive environment. So we decided actually to also interview a top manager. So in our interviews, we had a top manager, one or two project managers, and two or three team members, depending on how many interviews we get. And the attitude of the top management towards sharing of leadership in projects did matter in organizations.
Okay.
In one of your papers, which actually has Nathalie's name first, this is Drouin, Muller, Shanakan, and Vaganasser. I'm saying that because you did say that you carefully chose the sequence of the names. You talk about studies that have shown personality differences between successful project and program managers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and therefore, and that these roles actually require substantially different personalities as leaders, program manager and the project manager. Now, looking at them from a vertical sort of point of view and all that, can this actually work in the sense that if the personalities are so different, how can we share a vision so that you can actually pick someone who has the same vision with you, who will also try, I'm going through your process, try to show that they are capable leaders and therefore be chosen to become the horizontal leader in a section? Can you actually maintain different personalities but the same vision?
I'm not 100% sure that it could work that way. It's really, we define different models. You have, we have one diagram figure in the book where we say, where are you in your, what is your profile? Are you a deputy? Are you an oyster? Are you a star? So we define different type of personality, and it was really to help. Oh, okay, so this is what you.
Good,
Okay.
good technology, yeah, but beautiful book.
Yeah.
So that's the based on that, on the selection, it's really to help the project manager to say, well, there is some profile, there is some characteristic that can work better. Do you really have to delegate the leadership to someone who has a similar profile as you are? Probably not. It depends of what do you have to do in the project, and it depends as well is that what kind of task you this horizontal leader need to do. And from time to time, it might be, if it's a task with a low impact on the potential success of the project, maybe it's a good opportunity to give the chance to a young team member to collaborate and to try to have exercise this horizontal leadership on a specific task. So this is one example, but also we experience, horizontal leadership has an impact on project success. So does it depend on because you select someone with a similar personality, or you give the chance of to a young team member to experience decision making and he did well, or you delegate to a star that you think will be more innovative in conducting the task? I think, and Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, all these answers are possible. Are these scenarios are possible? So it is not one way of doing. It's not one answer. It's many, many answers depending on the context and depending what do you want to achieve as well. Having in mind that this is for the project to be successful. So this is, I'm not answering your question. I'm very good in that. I'm not giving you a very unique answer, but I'm giving you, different opportunities that could be used by the vertical leader to manage this balanced leadership based on personality.
Yeah, if I can add to that, you mentioned the different visions that the different people in this chain of command have, and I think the uniting element is the vision that comes from the sponsor. Yeah, and I have written about this in the book with Rodney Turner on project-oriented leadership. Yeah, that the project manager should not be the most visionary guy. Yeah, these project managers typically use up their time, they use up their money, and they have a new solution for the project every day. Yeah, so that's not necessarily the best fit. Yeah, but if we have project managers who can adopt the vision from the sponsor and communicate this to the horizontal and to the shared and distributed leaders in the team, then we have a uniting element that makes sure that we all run in the same direction. Yeah. So from that perspective, I think it is crucial to have a clear vision from the top, yeah, from the steering committee or the sponsor, and to one way or another subordinate to that vision and say that is where we're going. I might personally think a little bit different, but as a team we are going this way.
Indeed, and you did remind me that vision is a negative
Right.
sometimes, because if you take it all the way down, it is too low. It becomes a hindrance as opposed to a push. I was actually a bit surprised that I did not see anything about the principal agency relationship, because we are talking here about passing on some control of the project to someone else. But you don't see any conflict between have I chosen the right person? Is that person has the same ideas with me? I was quite surprised that has gone away from the balanced book.
Yeah, we write about this in our governance books. Yeah, and so therefore we wanted to keep that separate. Otherwise, people would ask us, how can you write about a governance theme in a leadership book? But you're right. There is, of course, the question: have I chosen the right horizontal leader? And that is addressed in the transition phase, or transition event, we call it. Yeah, when an evaluation is made, were the criteria the right ones to identify the horizontal leader? Was the person the right person? Yeah, did he or she fulfill the expectations, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think we didn't talk about principal agency, but there was a team in India who decided to write a paper, and I worked with them. And they were very conscious about psychological contract, because the person who was writing was a professor of organizational behavior. So she looked at the psychological contract between the leadership at the top and the leadership that's happening in projects. And she talked about, do the people who are asking you to do something follow follow that themselves, or do they breach the contract? So we talked about psychological breach and psychological. So there was psychological breach in some cases, and in the Indian project and the Australian project, and in some cases there was psychological match. So I think there was a theory which sounded like a principal agency theory, but it came from a different discipline, which is psychology.
And you also talk about this socio-cognitive space towards the end of it. And I think, Professor Sankaran, your background in organizational project management is coming into play over here. But can you tell us a little bit more about that, how balanced leadership and socio-cognitive space interact?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because we also realized this when we did the pilot, that there is something going on here. There's a psychological aspect of leadership. And we said that there is some kind of, if you look at Nonaka and Sekiguchi's work and on ba, the Japanese concept of ba, and they say there is a space. There's a space between people, and that's not just a physical space. It's also a psychological space. So the socio-cognitive space is a kind of a psychological space between, I want to give you leadership, but are you able to accept it? And have I empowered you to take on the leadership? And once I accepted, do I have the capacity and confidence to carry out the task? The third thing was, okay, I've now got the task, and there are other people in the team. I need to work with them. What do I know about them? What's their specialty? How can I pass some of my work to them? So the socio-cognitive space, comes basically from Bandura's work. So we looked at three concepts. One is empowerment. And once the project manager identifies a leader and selects the leader and identifies, and they have to empower them so that they are ready to take on the balance of task. Then there is the self-management. So the horizontal leader should feel that they are confident to take on the task, and the vertical leader must feel, hey, this guy is capable of taking this. So there is that balance. And the mental model happens as you work on the project, and you participate in kickoff meetings and other kinds of meetings, and also informal chats, having a beer in the pub or something. Then get to know each other. And so you actually have a model of what this capability looks like. So that's what we called it at socio-cognitive space. And we found that in the quantitative method of that Ralf finally did an analysis of, that the socio-cognitive space actually enhanced vertical and horizontal leadership had a contribution toward project success. But if you had good, healthy socio-cognitive space, then the success is higher. So that's what we determined.
And there's also an interesting link to a subject we talked about earlier, and that is the appointment as such. Yeah, when the self-efficacy of a person is relatively low, yeah, and the team feels that, then the team supports this person. Yeah, it perceives this person as a learner, yeah, an apprentice in leadership, and mentors the person. Whereas when the self-efficacy is very high, then they subordinate, yeah, and they do what they are told by the leader. Yeah. So this is never outspoken, interestingly. Yeah, it happens in this psychological space between the team members and the project manager.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm turning to Himanshu, but it looks as if I'm turning the other way. I hate the windows, actually.
I know we have a few people listening to this. So, fellows, if there are any questions from the audience, please do type in the chat. And in the meanwhile, I'll ask a very, very basic question. From your introduction to the book, you've said that, and it's an amazing thought, that the leadership is for, with, between, and about people. That makes it different from management, which is about tasks such as goal setting, planning, and controlling. So, yeah, planning and controlling, yes, but why is goal setting not part of leadership?
Well, leadership is about giving the people the motivation to set their goals. But to say that this project has a maximum cost of 20 million is management. Yeah. But to lead the team to come to a decision That's leadership. Yeah. So by discussing the pros and cons of spending money on that project, we are leading. But by the time we say this project will cost us 20 million, it's a management team.
We are coming close to the end of the discussion, so I really need to ask you about the Norwegian football team, and
Yeah.
because you've got a lovely reflection at the end of the book, and you've called it the way ahead, and there are quite some intriguing sort of questions and the pointers that you are leaving us with at the end of the book, which I think is beautiful in itself. But you do talk about football, which reminded me of the Japanese examples also. The fact that in a good team, when someone doesn't do something, someone else covers, and that continuous covering is really the interrelationship between tasks, and therefore the ability for one to help another, and we not just know one thing only. And we can see it now in football, since you where the center back is a very high scorer of goals, for example, while they're still also attackers also in a sense. And you portray the national Norwegian team very beautifully. First of all, do remind me, how much did you beat Germany? What was the score between Norway and Germany? Which is
I don't remember the actual score, but I remember that the Norwegians finally won over the Germans, and the Germans were the favorites. Yeah, and they were perceived from the beginning as the winner in that game. And the two master students who did that study with the football team, they said that the trainer of that football team was a very empowering type of person. Yeah, and he knew that he was not the one to give a good pep talk. Yeah, he's not the outstanding type of leader. Yeah, not the very extrovert type of speaker. Yeah, so he delegated it to somebody who from the team who he knew can do that, and he did that brilliantly. And finally, the team won.
and indeed, and this idea of picking the best person for the pep talk is fascinating. And at the same time, there's also a plan that players have been selected beforehand to become horizontal leaders, which is good and motivating, but also this interchangeability, that someone else will give you, well, we could call it a vision in a football game, to actually win the game itself. So I thought that was a very nice example. And then you go to another example where there's almost a tension between. This is the one where the social media example at the very end of the book, where the vertical leader actually does not understand the technology of social media and all that, and therefore the horizontal leaders have to take over. And there appears to be some tension there because, in a sense, the horizontal leader is requested to take big decisions, while I presume their salary scale is lower.
Right. Yeah.
Not more.
Balance. I think you use the word imbalance here, sort of. So, in essence, here now we're critiquing the horizontal leader as not being capable, even though no project manager knows everything in a project. But this social media seems to have made the horizontal leader stronger than the vertical leader in some way.
Yeah, it somewhat links to that old standing concept of a management support. Yeah, when you have a project or a task, yeah, in order to be successful, you need management support. Yeah, if management does not stand behind it, then all people involved say, why shall I engage in this if not even management cares about it? Yeah. So same thing here. The example is about a vertical leader appointing a horizontal leader to introduce social media in the company, but then they do not more than this. Yeah, they say, we follow you. You give us the guidelines what to do, but they don't go out and support this. Yeah. So in other words, despite this this high level of responsibility that a horizontal leader has, the old management ground rules like management support are still valid here, and they need to be respected.
Yeah, no, I think we are coming to the top of the hour over here. So, are there any questions from the audience? Okay. Well, no, I think it has been a fascinating conversation, Nick, and our authors. So thanks a lot for joining us. Hopefully, we are able to do this in person at some point and share a glass of wine or something stronger.
Our next book is already in the making.
Yeah.
And thanks very much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you.
It
Thanks
was
a lot. We enjoyed the questions.
yeah.
Thanks a lot, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Extremely for the book and being here.